Hey everybody, welcome to Jacob's Quest, and last night I saw Blumhouse's brand new horror film, Imaginary, which is being sold as a possessed teddy bear doll. And I will say that initially the movie starts off very much like that. It's kind of your standard middle-of-the-road Blumhouse film that it's not really a bad movie, but not anything significant. And for like the whole first half of the movie, it was kind of playing out that, right? Like familiar beats you've seen before, things that you've seen before. You're like, okay, kids talking to something no one else can see. They're all like worried about it. You have exposition lady who comes into play later. I'll talk about that. And it's very much like just playing out exactly like things you've seen before, kind of just generic at this point, right? But I will say, around the third act, when the third act starts, is when we really start diving deep into more interesting ideas. And I have a conspiracy about this movie we'll get into, but basically what it is this woman and her new stepkids, they're all moving into this house. It was her childhood home, and they kind of, you know, vaguely hint at like, oh yeah, I remember living here, and then I had to live with my grandparents because my dad kind of lost his mind, and I don't entirely remember what happened. And they're all very cagey and vague about exactly specifically what happened, because it's going to be some big reveal that, oh, guess what, the girl's imaginary friend used to be her imaginary friend, and it's been waiting in the house the whole time for her. And the whole movie, we're sitting here watching this girl with this teddy bear, and she's talking to the teddy bear, and she gets analyzed by this therapist who like records the whole thing. And you're like, okay, we've seen this before. They do an interesting twist about at the halfway point, where it turns out nobody else can see the teddy bear. And so like this whole time you're thinking like, okay, the teddy bear's possessed, or they're gonna like reveal a ghost is sitting in the corner. But like, no, the teddy bear itself is imaginary. So that was kind of an interesting thing. They like, you know, the mom's talking about like, oh yeah, I gotta go destroy that teddy bear, I guess, because that's the imaginary friend she's, you know, messing around with. And therapist is like, what teddy bear? What are you talking about? And they show the footage again, and there's no teddy bear there. And you're like, okay, that's kind of cool. It's an interesting way of doing that, because basically the audience has seen this thing the whole time, and it's not been real, or at the very least, it's not been something that other characters can see. So that was kind of a cool idea there. And then they really get interesting, and I kind of wish that this was in more of the movie, because I gotta say, like, if there's any meat on this movie at all, it's here in the third act. They're basically taken to the imaginary world, and it's like this psychedelic doorway and staircases endlessly lapping over each other, and they go into different doorways, and there are portals to different like dream scenarios. And basically this is where the strange imaginary creatures take kids when they want them to stay with them forever. And this is where we really start seeing like Freddy Krueger type stuff. And this kind of ties into my conspiracy theory that at some point early on in some maybe original draft, this was actually a Nightmare on Elm Street pitch of some kind. Because when you really start piecing together everything that's happening here, I'm like, it would have been such an easy twist to say like, oh, this Freddy Krueger was behind the whole thing. Especially when we start seeing like, you know, the girl sees her real mom who had also gone crazy at some point, and like, oh, now her mom's all normal and perfect, but like there's like this creepy edge to it. I'm like, this is exactly when Freddy Krueger would reveal himself, but like, you know. So that's kind of my conspiracy around this movie, is that early on this was a Nightmare on Elm Street. You know, that's where that leaves off. And so basically, yeah, you know, they get trapped into this world, and they have to get the kid back, but then the stepmom gets trapped into this world. And they even do a fake out ending. And this is kind of my other thing I suspect happened here, is they do a fake out ending where they all escape and everything's happy, but then suddenly things get sinister again at the last second. And she's like, no, I'm still in the imaginary world. No, you know. And you think that that's where the movie's going to end, you know, because many horror movies have done that, where you get kind of like this scary ending. Like, even again, the original Nightmare on Elm Street ended with them being like, oh, they're actually still in the dream, and the car is like Freddy Krueger, and then the arm comes out the window and grabs the mom. Like, you know, it was a very similar vibe that they were giving off, so kind of leads more towards my conspiracy there. But then they have an actual happy ending where the mom really does get rescued, and they really do go back to the original, or back to the real world, and they even kind of play off like a little joke at the end. And I suspect that that was actually some kind of reaction to like test audiences. You know, I feel like the original cut had that ending that was really like, oh no, they're still trapped, and then the movie ends. And I feel like maybe they tested some audiences and they didn't like it, so they went back and reshot this last like 5-minute ending where they actually do have a happy ending. That's what I suspect happened. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if some article comes out and be like, oh yeah, we had to reshoot the ending because no one liked it. It was too sad. I don't know. So that is another thing. Next, I do gotta say, this movie's like relatively bloodless. There's only a couple scenes that you see any real blood. I mean, you know, you see a couple like cuts and scratches, but like there's not much gore to speak of. And I didn't actually pay attention when I went to see it. I think this might be a PG-13 movie. Wouldn't surprise me. But in any case, you know, it's got a decent amount of scares and spooks, but it does feel generally generic up until you get to the third act, when you do wish like that was much more a bigger part of the movie. But yeah, the last thing I want to talk about is Exposition Lady, because it felt like they were doing a parody of other exposition ladies in horror movies, because you always have that scene where some character is a professor, or they've studied this subject, this like very niche subject, for their entire life, and they're basically just there to tell the audience all the background you need to know about the demon or the spirit or the demon world, or, you know, in this case, the imaginary world. And like, it's always the same exact, like, oh, across different cultures they're called different things, and they've been around forever, and they get so specific in the details of how everything works that you're like, I'm sorry, I don't care how many books you read and how long you studied on the subject, how would you know the demon rules, you know? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And they do the same thing here. Like, this lady is like, you know, they mention like, oh, the dad went crazy because he stared into the eyes of the imaginary creature, and then his mind was filled with millions of imaginations of different kids, and so his frontal lobe like got to whatever, you know, like, and that's why he went crazy. I'm like, how would you know this, lady? How? And then like, she knows exactly what they need to do to get in there, and she knows exactly what they need to do to get out, and how to find this and how to do that, and she has all this information, and she like wrote a little book about it. And at the very least, they do some kind of strange twist where, you know, when they get to the imaginary world, she's rambling about how like, oh, I should have stayed here, and that's why I've been talking with the creature, and he told me to bring you here. And so now she's evil, I guess, and this was all like part of her trick, which she was acting pretty shady. So I guess that's at least something different. But yeah, this had like a parody level case of Exposition Lady. Like, she knew so much stuff that there's no way she should have known any of this. And I do hope horror movies kind of stop doing that, because it's such a trope at this point. Like, maybe there's some other word for it, but like, you go watch any of Insidious or any of the Conjuring movies, like, they all got exposition ladies, you know, or exposition people. Anyways. But yeah, that's Imaginary. Look, it's, for the most part, it's perfectly serviceable, middle of the road, harmless horror movie. You'll forget about it after like a week. You know, it's nothing special. I don't think it's gonna be anyone's, like, you know, top 10 list or anything. It's just okay, it's whatever. But that third act, I'm like, okay, you got something here with the imaginary world and kind of giving off Nightmare on Elm Street vibes. I'm like, okay, there was something here. I can see a different version of this movie that was a lot creepier. But we kind of, in this one, we have a relatively safe generic one. That's fine. It's whatever. But yeah, I am curious to look into it. I do want to know, was this at any point a Nightmare on Elm Street reboot pitch? Because I can see a world where someone wrote that and then they're like, okay, well, instead of it being dreams, let's just say it was imagination. And instead of being like Freddy's boiler room, let's just say it was the imaginary realm. You know, other than that, it's like the exact same stuff going on. So, very curious to see if that ever comes to light, because I can see that happening. I can see that being the case. But anyways, that's Imaginary. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you're gonna go check this one out. Like I said, it's harmless. It's definitely like, you know, stilted dialogue, kind of funny acting choices. They try to inject some humor in there. Sometimes it works, a lot of the times it doesn't, but it's whatever. That's my thing. It's not insultingly bad, but it's also not like one of the instant greats, you know. I feel like Smile and Talk to Me last year were like kind of instant greats of like, okay, I can recommend someone watch this. This one, it's like, yeah, if you have nothing else to watch on Netflix, I guess you can watch this. So why not? Anyways, that is Imaginary, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.